A man looked and he saw an enormous black sea. And the darkness was overwhelming. But he could still see some of the details. And he noticed that in the water there was movement. And as his eyes focused, he saw that this movement, that it was people. Thousands, maybe millions or billions of people that were drowning, treading water, fighting for their life. But he also saw just the tip of a rock. And as this rock began to move through the water, that he could see that this was an enormous rock, literally a mountain that had come out of the water, and that those who were right there, close to the rock, that they began to grab a hold of. They began to grab a hold of the rock and they were pulled to safety. And others, they climbed on the rock. And those who were close realized what was going on, that they swam as hard as they could and they got over and they got onto the rock. But then he looked again and he saw something that to him was very confusing. As soon as the people got to the rock, they didn't stay at the water's edge, but they climbed up to the safest spots that they could find. And there, they began to entertain themselves. They began to tell each other interesting stories and began to impress one another with how well they could speak and the clothes that they had bought. But were these not people who had just been saved from drowning? And were the people that were still in the water not people who they knew? Maybe their families, the children, fathers. Was there no one still in that blackness whom they still loved? But there were some that stood on the edge of the rock and they shouted as hard as they could, "Come to the rock. Swim this way. Here is where you will find safety." And many did. Anyone within the shout of their voice began to swim, began to try to reach the safety of the rock. But there were still others. Not many, but a few. And still the man does not realize how this was even possible. But some of those who were saved, they climbed to the top of the rock, they stood on the edge, and they jumped back into the black water as far as they could. And they would save a few, and they would climb to the rock, and they would jump back into the water, back into the blackness. And there's a thing about a man, when he saves a life, that he takes off his coat, he takes off his shoes, he takes off his clothes, he takes off anything that hinders him from saving that life.